The intergalactic broadcast flickered across countless alien screens, seeking human volunteers for intimate cross-species study. Experience Earth's finest mating practices firsthand. Accompanying the message were images of stunningly attractive denobulans, their ridged foreheads and multiple spouses hinting at exotic pleasures unknown. Earth's governments reacted with immediate alarm. Emergency meetings convened as diplomats scrambled to contain what many saw as a blatant attempt to exploit humanity. But their efforts were too late. Within hours, the extranet servers handling volunteer applications crashed under the strain of thousands of eager human males clamoring for a chance to participate. Matthew Crawford sat in a stark UN briefing room, his mind reeling. The 28-year-old former military pilot turned civilian contractor had been secretly selected for a mission he never could have imagined. His task: infiltrate the Denobulan research station and uncover their true motives. Your calm demeanor, scientific background, and combat training make you uniquely qualified, the stern-faced official explained. We need eyes and ears on the inside. This study reeks of ulterior motives. Days later, Matthew's shuttle docked with the massive Denobulan orbital facility. His heart raced as he stepped into the airlock, realizing he was likely the only human aboard. The door hissed open, revealing a corridor lined with expectant alien faces. A striking female Denobulan stepped forward, her blue eyes sparkling with barely concealed excitement. "Welcome, Matthew. I am Varys, lead researcher for this project." She gestured expansively. "We have such hopes for what we might learn together." As Varys led him through the station, Matthew's training kicked in. He cataloged potential escape routes, security choke points, and the eager stares of countless Denobulan scientists. Their interests seemed to go beyond mere scientific curiosity. In his quarters, Matthew discovered hidden cameras and sensor arrays that went far beyond standard medical monitoring. He kept his face impassive, mind racing. What were the Denobulans really after? Varys's voice purred through the intercom. "Please prepare yourself for initial scans and interviews. We're particularly interested in human stamina and emotional bonding during mating. Such fascinating concepts." Matthew steeled himself. He would play along, gather intelligence, and unravel the mystery behind this study. Earth was counting on him to navigate the charged atmosphere of alien desire and scientific probing. As he stepped out to meet his eager observers, Matthew couldn't shake the feeling that he was a lamb among wolves. Yet a part of him thrilled at the challenge. He would show these aliens exactly what humans were capable of, in more ways than one. Matthew stepped out of his quarters, adjusting his shirt as he prepared to face the Denobulan researchers. The corridor hummed with activity, alien scientists bustling past with data pads and equipment. He took a deep breath, steadying himself for what lay ahead. Varys greeted him at the entrance to the medical bay, her blue eyes gleaming with enthusiasm. "Matthew, welcome. Are you ready to begin?" He nodded, following her into a room filled with advanced scanning equipment. As he lay on the examination table, Matthew's military training kicked in. He cataloged every detail: the soft whir of machinery, the faint scent of antiseptic, the barely perceptible vibration of the station's engines. Over the next few hours, Matthew endured a battery of tests. Non-invasive scanners mapped his body in exquisite detail. Electrodes monitored his brain activity as he viewed images and responded to questions. Through it all, he maintained a calm facade, all while gathering every scrap of information he could. "Fascinating," Varys murmured, studying a holographic display of Matthew's neural activity. "Your emotional responses are so nuanced, yet controlled. It's quite different from our own physiology." Matthew seized the opportunity to probe for information. "How so? I'd be interested to learn more about Denobulan biology." Varys launched into an enthusiastic explanation, detailing the differences in their species' limbic systems. As she spoke, Matthew noticed other researchers watching them with poorly concealed interest, and in some cases, what appeared to be jealousy. Days passed, each filled with more tests and interviews. Matthew played his role perfectly, the model research subject. But beneath his cooperative exterior, his mind never stopped working. He memorized the station's layout, noted security protocols, and carefully observed the interactions between the Denobulan staff. It was during one of these observation sessions that Varys approached him. "Matthew, would you care to join me for a tour of our facilities? We're quite proud of our laboratories, and I'd love to show you some of our recreational areas as well." He accepted, recognizing the opportunity for what it was. As they walked, Varys pointed out various features of the station, her hand occasionally brushing against his arm. Matthew found himself genuinely enjoying her company, drawn in by her quick wit and genuine curiosity about Earth culture. "Tell me," Varys asked as they paused before a viewport, stars stretching endlessly before them, "what do humans do for leisure? How do you connect with one another?" Matthew described Earth's diverse entertainment options, from sports to art to social gatherings. As he spoke, he noticed Varys leaning in closer, her eyes fixed on his lips. The moment was shattered by the arrival of another Denobulan scientist. "Varys," the male said sharply, "the next phase of testing is ready to begin. General Thax is requesting an update on our progress." Varys straightened, her professional demeanor returning instantly. "Of course, Dr. Kren. I'll be there shortly." She turned to Matthew. "I'm afraid we'll have to cut our tour short. Please, feel free to explore the recreational areas on your own." As Varys hurried away with Dr. Kren, Matthew caught the male Denobulan shooting him a hostile glare. Filed away for later analysis, Matthew thought. He spent the next hour wandering the public areas of the station, all while keeping an eye out for anything unusual. It was as he passed a seemingly ordinary bulkhead that his instincts flared. The security measures here were subtly different, more robust. Matthew casually leaned against the wall, activating a hidden scanner in his wristband. The device picked up traces of a sophisticated computer network beyond the bulkhead. Restricted area, he realized, now to find a way in. That night, as the station's lights dimmed to simulate evening, Matthew lay in his quarters, mind racing. The hidden cameras he'd discovered earlier now seemed even more sinister in light of the restricted area. What were the Denobulans really after? His musings were interrupted by a soft chime from his personal console. An encrypted message from his UN handlers flashed across the screen. "Growing concerns. Re-Denobulan study. Gather intel on Genesis project. Exercise extreme caution. Discovery of true mission. Severe diplomatic consequences." Matthew's eyes sharp. The stakes had just been raised significantly. He needed answers, and there was only one person he trusted enough to ask. The next morning, he cornered Varys in a quiet corridor. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "Somewhere private." Varys hesitated, then nodded. She led him to a small observation lounge, empty at this early hour. As the door slid shut behind them, Matthew turned to face her. "I know about the cameras in my quarters," he said without preamble, "and the restricted area of the station. What's really going on here, Varys?" Her eyes widened in shock, then sorrow. "Matthew, I'm so sorry. This isn't what I wanted." She sank into a chair, shoulders slumping. "The Denobulan government has been pressuring us. They want military applications for our research." Matthew sat beside her, his voice gentle. "Tell me everything." As Varys began to explain, pouring out her ethical concerns and the weight of her guilt, a piercing alarm cut through the air. Red warning lights flashed throughout the station. "Attention all personnel," a voice boomed over the intercom. "Prepare for the arrival of General Thax. All research subjects are to report to Containment Area Alpha immediately." Varys paled. "Oh no, they're here!" Before Matthew could respond, the door burst open. Dr. Kren stood there, flanked by 2 security officers. His eyes blazed with triumph and impossibly strong rage. "Seize the human," he snarled. "General Thax wants him brought in for questioning. And Varys, the general would like a word with you as well." As the guards moved to grab him, Matthew's combat training surged to the forefront. He tensed, ready to fight, but a subtle shake of Varys's head stopped him. This wasn't the time or place. He allowed himself to be led away, mind already formulating plans. Whatever this Genesis project was, whatever the Denobulans truly wanted, he had to find out. the fate of Earth's relationship with an alien species, and perhaps much more, hung in the balance. Matthew caught one last glimpse of Varys as he was marched down the corridor. The fear and persistence in her eyes told him one thing. He had an ally in this strange and dangerous game. Now he just had to figure out how to use that to his advantage before it was too late. The corridors echoed with the sound of heavy boots as Matthew was marched towards Containment Area Alpha. His mind raced, analyzing every detail of his surroundings. The increased security presence was palpable, with armed denobulan guards posted at regular intervals. As they approached a set of reinforced doors, Matthew caught sight of a tall, imposing figure. General Thax stood there, his ridged forehead creased in a severe frown. The general's eyes locked onto Matthew, scrutinizing him with cold calculation. "So this is the human specimen," Thax said, his voice a low growl. "I expected more." Dr. Kren, hovering at the general's elbow, smirked. "Appearances can be deceiving, sir. We've already gathered some fascinating data." Matthew was ushered into a stark white room filled with advanced medical equipment. Over the next several hours, he endured a battery of tests that pushed him to his limits. Electrodes monitored his vitals as he ran on a treadmill until exhaustion. His reflexes were tested with increasingly difficult simulations. Through it all, Matthew maintained his composure, even as he felt his body begin to falter. During a brief respite, he overheard Dr. Kren speaking urgently to General Thax. "The human's endurance is remarkable," Kren said, gesturing towards a holographic display of Matthew's biometrics. "His ability to adapt to stress and maintain cognitive function under duress far exceeds our own capabilities." Thax's eyes narrowed. "Interesting. Focus your efforts on replicating these traits. If we can incorporate this resilience into our own soldiers..." Matthew's heart sank. His suspicions were confirmed. The denobulans had military applications in mind. He steeled himself for the next round of tests, knowing that each piece of data they gathered could potentially be used against Earth. Days blurred together in a haze of examinations and interviews. Matthew's only respite came in the form of Varys, who seemed increasingly troubled by the direction of the research. One evening, as Varys was reviewing data from Matthew's latest stress test, she abruptly shut off her datapad. "This isn't right," she murmured, more to herself than to Matthew. He seized the opportunity. "What do you mean?" Varys hesitated, then met his gaze. "This study, it's become something I never intended. The military's involvement, the focus on enhancing our physical capabilities, it goes against everything I believe about scientific ethics." Matthew leaned in, lowering his voice. "I've been wondering about that. It seems like your approach is missing a crucial element of human mating practices." "Oh?" Varys's antenna twitched with interest. "You're focusing entirely on the physical aspects," Matthew explained. "But for humans, emotional bonds are just as important, if not more so, when it comes to mating and reproduction." Varys's eyes widened. "Of course! How could we have overlooked something so fundamental?" She began pacing, her mind clearly racing. "We need to adjust our research parameters. A comprehensive study of human mating behavior must include emotional and psychological factors." Over the next few days, Varys worked tirelessly to develop a new research proposal. Matthew assisted where he could, all while gathering valuable intelligence on the denobulans' true motives. When Varys presented her ideas to General Thax, the military leader was initially dismissive. "We need concrete results, not nebulous emotional data," he growled. But Varys persisted. "Understanding the full spectrum of human mating behavior could provide invaluable insights for our military strategy," she argued. "Imagine being able to predict and manipulate enemy behavior based on their emotional bonds." Thax's expression shifted from skepticism to intrigue. "Very well. Proceed with this new phase of research, but I expect regular reports on your progress." The following weeks saw a marked shift in Matthew's daily routine. Instead of grueling physical tests, he found himself in a series of carefully orchestrated social situations with Varys and other denobulan scientists. They shared meals, engaged in recreational activities, and had long conversations about their respective cultures. Throughout it all, Matthew struggled to maintain his focus on the mission. He found himself genuinely enjoying Varys's company, drawn to her quick wit and genuine curiosity. But he couldn't afford to let his guard down completely. Dr. Kren watched these interactions with growing resentment. One day, as Matthew and Varys were engrossed in a game of three-dimensional chess, Kren stormed into the room. "This is a waste of valuable research time," he snapped. "We should be focusing on quantifiable data, not playing games." Varys stood, her normally calm demeanor replaced by cold anger. "Dr. Kren, may I remind you that this study is under my direction. If you have concerns, you can bring them to General Thax." Kren's face twisted with barely suppressed rage. He stormed out, leaving an uncomfortable silence in his wake. As the days passed, Matthew began to piece together more information about the mysterious Genesis project. Overheard conversations and carelessly discarded data pads revealed a disturbing truth. The Denobulans were facing a severe population crisis due to plummeting fertility rates. One night, unable to sleep, Matthew found Varys in an observation lounge, staring out at the stars. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked softly. She turned, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Matthew, there's something I need to tell you about why we're really doing this research." As Varys poured out the truth about her people's desperate situation, Matthew felt his dedication wavering. The Denobulans' actions, while still ethically questionable, came from a place of desperation rather than malice. Before he could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. Red emergency lights bathed the corridor in an eerie glow. "Security breach detected," an automated voice announced. "Classified information has been transmitted to an unknown destination. All personnel report to designated security checkpoints." Varys's eyes widened in fear. "Matthew, what have you done?" But Matthew was just as shocked as she was. He hadn't transmitted anything. As the sound of approaching guards echoed down the corridor, he realized with growing dread that someone had just made him the perfect scapegoat. The door burst open, revealing General Thax flanked by a squad of heavily armed security officers. His eyes locked onto Matthew, burning with fury. "Seize the human," Thax snarled. "He's jeopardized everything we've worked for." As the guards moved to apprehend him, Matthew's mind raced. He had seconds to decide: fight and potentially spark an interstellar incident, or submit and hope he could unravel this plot before it was too late. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance, and Matthew's next move would determine everything. Matthew's mind raced as he weighed his options. The guards were closing in, their weapons trained on him. He glanced at Varys, whose face was a mask of shock and confusion. In that split second, he made his decision. "I'll come quietly," Matthew said, raising his hand slowly. "There's been a misunderstanding." General Thax's eyes narrowed. "Secure him," he barked. The guards moved swiftly, restraining Matthew with magnetic cuffs. As they led him away, he caught one last glimpse of Varys, her antenna drooping in distress. The next few hours passed in a blur of interrogations and scans. Matthew found himself in a high-security holding cell, its walls a smooth, impenetrable alloy. He paced the small space, his mind working overtime to process the situation. Outside his cell, the station was in chaos. Alarms blared intermittently as security teams swept every section. General Thax had ordered a complete lockdown, paranoia gripping the Denobulan leadership. In her quarters, Varys sat hunched over a console, her fingers flying across the holographic interface. She knew Matthew couldn't be responsible for the data breach. The timestamps didn't add up. He had been with her when the transmission occurred, but proving it would be another matter entirely. As she dug deeper into the station's security logs, a pattern began to emerge. Unauthorized access to restricted databases, carefully masked but traceable if you knew where to look. And all of it led back to one source, Dr. Kren's personal terminal. Varys's antenna twitched with a mixture of anger and triumph. She had him. Meanwhile, light years away, the leaked data was causing a stir in the halls of power on Earth. Emergency meetings were called, strategies debated. The revelation of the Denobulans' true motives and their desperate fertility crisis sent shockwaves through the diplomatic community. Admiral Chen of the United Earth Space Force slammed her fist on the conference table. "We can't let this stand," she declared. The denobulans have violated every agreement we've made. I'm dispatching the UES Horizon to their system immediately. Back on the station, Matthew had settled into a state of hyper-awareness. He noted every detail of his cell, every sound from the corridor outside. His military training kicked in as he assessed potential weaknesses in the security systems. The ventilation system seemed promising, and the guard rotations had a subtle but exploitable pattern. But Matthew held back. Escaping now would only confirm his guilt in the denobulans' eyes. No, he had to trust that the truth would come out, and perhaps, he admitted to himself, he was holding out hope that Varys would find a way to clear his name. As if summoned by his thoughts, Varys appeared outside his cell, her face set in unwavering willpower. She glanced furtively down the corridor before approaching the energy barrier. "Matthew," she whispered urgently, "I've found something, evidence that might exonerate you." Hope surged in Matthew's chest, but he kept his voice low and steady. "What is it?" "Access logs, security footage. It all points to Kren. He's the one who leaked the data." Matthew's mind raced with the implications. "We need to tell General Thax." Varys nodded. "I'm on my way to him now. I had to tell you first." Her eyes softened. "I knew you couldn't have done this." As Varys turned to leave, alarms blared once again. A voice echoed through the station. "Attention all personnel. An unidentified vessel has entered the system and is on an intercept course. All hands to battle stations." Matthew's stomach dropped. He knew exactly what that meant. Earth had sent a response force, and things were about to get much more complicated. General Thax's voice crackled over the intercom. "This is not a drill. Prepare for potential hostile engagement." In the command center, Thax loomed over a holographic display of the system. The human vessel's approach vector was highlighted in angry red. His mind raced with possibilities, each more dire than the last. A junior officer approached cautiously. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Earthship. They're demanding the release of all human personnel and full disclosure of our research." Thax's ridged forehead furrowed deeply. "Ignore it," he growled. "Prepare defensive systems. If they want to fight, we'll give them one." Just then, Varys burst into the command center, breathless. "General Thax, I have urgent information regarding the security breach." Thax whirled on her, eyes blazing. "This had better be important, Doctor." As Varys laid out her evidence against Dr. Kren, Thax's expression shifted from skepticism to cold fury. He dispatched a team to apprehend Kren immediately. But Kren, sensing the net closing around him, had already made his move. He commandeered a small research vessel, attempting to flee the station. His escape was short-lived, however, as denobulan security forces quickly overtook and captured him. With Kren in custody and his guilt established, Matthew was released from his cell. But the situation remained far from tenacity. The human warship, the UES Horizon, had entered orbit around the denobulan research station, its weapons systems powered and ready. Matthew found himself in an impossible position. He knew he had to act fast to prevent an interstellar incident. As he and Varys rushed to the command center, he formulated a plan. "General Thax," Matthew said as they entered, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "I have a proposal." Thax turned, his expression a mix of wariness and grudging respect. "Speak quickly, human. We're on the brink of war with your people." Matthew took a deep breath. "Let me act as a mediator. I can arrange a face-to-face meeting between you and the Earthship's captain. We can perseverance this peacefully." Thax's eyes narrowed as he considered the offer. The tense silence was broken by a communication officer. "Sir, the Earth vessel is hailing us again. They're demanding a response in the next 5 minutes, or they'll open fire." Thax's shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly. He turned to Matthew, his voice low and intense. "Very well, human. Make your arrangements. But know this. If you betray us, the consequences will be severe." Matthew nodded grimly. "I understand. I'll need to use your communication array to contact the Earthship." As Matthew prepared to open a channel to the UES Horizon, Varys pulled him aside. "Matthew," she said urgently, "there's something else you need to know. Something we discovered in the research data." Matthew listened intently as Varys explained their findings, a unique genetic compatibility between humans and denobulans that could potentially solve the fertility crisis. His mind raced with the implications. "This changes everything," he murmured. "We need to include this in the negotiations." Varys nodded, her antenna quivering with a mix of excitement and anxiety. "I'll prepare a full presentation. But Matthew," she hesitated, then met his eyes. "Be careful out there." Matthew managed a small smile. "I will. We're going to fix this, Varys, I promise." With a deep breath, Matthew turned to the communications array. He opened a channel to the UES horizon, steeling himself for the most important diplomatic mission of his life. The future of two worlds hung in the balance, and he was the linchpin holding it all together. As the face of Captain Elena Rodriguez appeared on the screen, Matthew squared his shoulders. "Captain," he said, his voice calm and authoritative, "this is Matthew Parker. We need to talk." "Talk," Matthew said firmly. "The situation is critical, but there's still a chance for a peaceful resolution." Captain Rodriguez's holographic image flickered slightly, her expression stern. "Mr. Parker, we've detected weapons powering up on that station. Explain yourself now." Matthew took a deep breath. "Captain, I understand your concerns, but I have crucial information that could change everything. I'm proposing a face-to-face meeting on the neutral moon in this system. General Thax has agreed to attend. This may be our only chance to avoid conflict." Rodriguez's eyes narrowed. "And why should we trust you or the denobulans after what's happened?" "Because the alternative is war," Matthew said simply. "And neither of our species wants that. Please, Captain, give diplomacy a chance." After a tense moment, Rodriguez nodded curtly. "Very well, Mr. Parker. We'll rendezvous at the moon in 6 hours, but be warned. Any sign of hostility, and we will respond with full force." As the transmission ended, Matthew turned to find General Thax looming behind him. The denobulan's ridged forehead was furrowed with awe-inspiring anger. "I hope you know what you're doing, human," Thax growled. "If this is a trick—" Matthew met his gaze steadily. "It's not, General. This meeting is our best hope for peace." The next 6 hours passed in a flurry of activity. A neutral facility was hastily constructed on the moon's surface, while both the Earth vessel and the denobulan ship moved into orbit. Matthew and Varys worked furiously to prepare their presentation on the genetic compatibility discovery. As they boarded the shuttle to the moon's surface, Varys pulled Matthew aside. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her antenna twitching nervously. "There's still so much we don't understand about the compatibility." Matthew squeezed her hand reassuringly. "It's our best shot, Varys. We have to try." The shuttle touched down on the moon's dusty surface. As they disembarked, Matthew saw the Earth delegation approaching from the other direction. His heart raced as he recognized Captain Rodriguez leading the group, her face set in a grim expression. Inside the facility, tension crackled in the air as the two groups faced each other across a long table. General Thax's security detail stood at attention, their weapons visible but lowered. Matthew stepped forward, acutely aware of the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "Thank you all for agreeing to this meeting," he began. "We stand at a crossroads that will determine the future of both our species. But before we address the current crisis, there's something you all need to know." Matthew nodded to Varys, who activated a holographic display. Images of DNA strands and cellular structures filled the air between the two delegations. "During our research," Matthew explained, "we discovered something extraordinary. There's a unique genetic compatibility between humans and denobulans. This compatibility could potentially solve the denobulan fertility crisis without resorting to military applications." Captain Rodriguez leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "What exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Parker?" "I'm suggesting a path forward," Matthew replied. "A way for our species to help each other without conflict." He launched into a detailed explanation of their findings, with Varys adding technical details. As they spoke, Matthew could see the skepticism on both sides slowly giving way to cautious interest. General Thax's gruff voice cut through the scientific jargon. "This is all very fascinating, but how can we trust that this isn't some sort of human trick?" Before Matthew could respond, Captain Rodriguez spoke up. The general raises a fair point. Earth's government is demanding full disclosure of all denobulan military research in exchange for any cooperation. The room erupted into heated arguments. Accusations of espionage and hidden agendas flew back and forth. Matthew watched in dismay as the fragile progress they'd made began to crumble. In that moment, he knew he had to take drastic action. "Enough!" he shouted, silencing the room. All eyes turned to him. "You want proof?" Matthew said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I'll give you proof. I volunteer to undergo a procedure that will temporarily alter my genetic structure with denobulan DNA." Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Vera stepped forward, her eyes wide. "Matthew, no. It's too dangerous. We haven't tested it on a living subject yet." "Then I'll be the first," Matthew said firmly. He turned to face both delegations. "This will provide irrefutable evidence of the compatibility and show the possibilities for peaceful cooperation." General Thax and Captain Rodriguez exchanged glances, clearly taken aback by the offer. After a moment of silent communication, they both nodded cautiously. "If you're willing to take this risk, Mr. Parker, we'll allow it," Captain Rodriguez said. Varys grabbed Matthew's arm. "Then I insist on being the denobulan donor," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "We're in this together." As a medical team was hastily assembled, combining experts from both species, Matthew felt a mix of fear and persistence. He caught Varys's eye as they were led to adjacent medical pods. She gave him a small, nervous smile. "Whatever happens," Matthew said softly, "I'm glad we're facing it together." The pods closed around them, and Matthew felt the cool touch of medical sensors on his skin. As the procedure began, he closed his eyes, hoping that this desperate gamble would be enough to bridge the gap between their worlds. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the facility. Matthew's eyes snapped open as he heard shouts of panic from the medical team. Through the pod's transparent cover, he saw doctors rushing back and forth, their faces etched with concern. "Critical error in the genetic sequencing," someone yelled. "We're losing cellular stability in both subjects." Matthew felt a burning sensation spreading through his body. He turned his head, seeing Varys in the pod next to him, her face contorted in pain. Fear gripped him as he realized their bold plan might cost them their lives. Just as the situation seemed hopeless, a commotion erupted near the control panel. Matthew glimpsed a familiar face, Dr. Kren, the very man who had betrayed them earlier. Somehow, he had broken free from his guards and was now furiously working at the controls. "What is he doing?" General Thax bellowed. "Stop him!" But before anyone could intervene, Kren made a final adjustment. The burning sensation in Matthew's body subsided, replaced by a strange tingling. He saw Varys relax in her pod, the pain leaving her features. As the pods opened, Matthew sat up slowly, aware that something fundamental had changed within him. He looked at his hands, noticing subtle differences in the texture of his skin. Across from him, Varys emerged, her normally blue-tinted skin now showing a distinctly human flush. The room fell silent as human and denobulan medical staff ran scans on both of them. Finally, a human doctor spoke up, her voice filled with awe. It's incredible. The genetic integration was successful. They both show stable combinations of human and denobulan DNA. As the implications of this success sank in, Matthew locked eyes with Varys. In that moment, he knew their shared experience had forged a bond between them that transcended their different origins. But he also sensed something else, a strange new awareness pulsing at the edges of his consciousness. The delegates from both sides crowded around, peppering them with questions. But Matthew's focus was drawn to a small object on a nearby table. Without thinking, he reached out his hand, and the object slowly rose into the air, floating towards him. Gas filled the room. Varys stared at him, then at her own hands. With a look of concentration, she gestured at a datapad, which suddenly flicked on and began scrolling through files on its own. As amazement and concern rippled through the gathered officials, Matthew realized that their demonstration had opened up possibilities far beyond what anyone had imagined. The genetic procedure hadn't just proven compatibility, it had unlocked hidden potential in both human and denobulan DNA. Captain Rodriguez and General Thax exchanged meaningful looks. The captain stepped forward, her voice steady but tinged with awe. "I think," she said slowly, "that we need to reevaluate the entire scope of our negotiations." Matthew nodded, still marveling at his newfound abilities. "Agreed. What we've discovered here today goes far beyond solving a fertility crisis. We're looking at the potential for a new era of human-denobulin cooperation." As the delegates began to discuss the implications of this breakthrough, Matthew felt Varys's hand slip into his. Together they stood at the threshold of a new frontier, one that promised to reshape the future of both their species in ways they were only beginning to understand. Comprehend. The genetic procedure had not only bridged the gap between their species, but had also unlocked hidden potential within their DNA. As the initial shock subsided, Captain Rodriguez stepped forward, her expression a mix of awe and concern. "Mr. Parker, Ms. Varys, I believe it's in everyone's best interest that you both undergo immediate medical evaluation. We need to understand the full extent of these changes." General Thax nodded in agreement, his earlier hostility replaced by cautious curiosity. "Agreed. This development could have far-reaching implications for both our peoples." In the days that followed, Matthew and Varys found themselves at the center of an unprecedented scientific endeavor. The Neutral Moon facility was quickly transformed into a makeshift research center as both human and denobulin scientists scrambled to study the effects of the genetic integration. Matthew sat on the edge of an examination table, watching as a holographic display showed a real-time scan of his cellular structure. Dr. Kren, now working alongside the human medical team, pointed to a series of complex molecular chains. "Fascinating," the denobulin scientist murmured. "The human and denobulin DNA strands have intertwined in ways we never thought possible. It's as if they were always meant to fit together." Across the room, Varys underwent her own battery of tests. Her skin had taken on a more human-like pallor, while her antennae seemed more responsive to subtle environmental changes. She caught Matthew's eye and gave him a small smile, a gesture that conveyed both excitement and trepidation. As the preliminary results came in, it became clear that the genetic alterations had profound effects on both Matthew and Varys. Matthew found himself able to lift objects that would have been impossible for him before, his muscles denser and more efficient. Varys, on the other hand, demonstrated cognitive abilities that surpassed even the most brilliant denobulin minds. Captain Rodriguez and General Thax convened an emergency meeting to discuss the implications of these findings. The tension in the room was palpable as representatives from both species debated the potential benefits and risks of further research. "We cannot ignore the military applications," General Thax argued, his voice gruff. "A force of enhanced soldiers could tip the balance of power in our sector." Captain Rodriguez shook her head firmly. "That's exactly the kind of thinking that led us to the brink of war. We need to focus on the humanitarian potential. Imagine the medical breakthroughs we could achieve with this knowledge." As the debate raged on, Matthew and Varys found themselves drawn to each other, sharing quiet moments away from the constant scrutiny of the scientists and diplomats. "How are you holding up?" Matthew asked, noting the way Varys's antenna twitched with nervous energy. She sighed, her newly acquired human mannerisms blending seamlessly with her denobulin gestures. "It's overwhelming. I feel like I can process information faster than ever before, but there's so much we still don't understand about what's happened to us." Matthew nodded, flexing his hand and watching the play of muscles under his skin. "I know what you mean. It's like I'm in someone else's body sometimes, but we're in this together, right?" Varys reached out and took his hand, a spark of electricity passing between them at the touch. "Together," she agreed. Their moment of connection was interrupted by an urgent announcement over the facility's communication system. "All personnel report to the main conference room immediately. Repeat, all personnel to the main conference room." As they hurried to the meeting, Matthew and Varys found the room buzzing with excitement. Captain Rodriguez stood at the front, her face set in determined lines. "After much discussion and negotiation," she began, "we have reached an agreement. A joint research facility will be established on the denobulin homeworld to further explore the potential of human denobulin genetic compatibility. This Interspecies Genetic Research Center will be our best chance at unlocking the secrets of what we've discovered here. General Thax stepped forward, his expression unreadable. In the interest of transparency and cooperation, the Denobulan government has agreed to share all relevant scientific data with Earth. In return, we ask for your full commitment to this joint venture. As the announcement sank in, Matthew felt a mix of anticipation and apprehension. He glanced at Varys, seeing his own emotions mirrored in her eyes. They were about to embark on a journey that would not only change their lives, but potentially reshape the future of both their species. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparation. As the primary subjects of study, Matthew and Varys were at the center of the planning for the new research center. They underwent countless tests and examinations, each revealing new facets of their altered physiology. As they prepared to depart for the Denobulan homeworld, Matthew noticed that his mood seemed to fluctuate more rapidly than usual. One moment he felt elated at the possibilities that lay ahead. The next he was gripped by a deep, inexplicable melancholy. Varys, too, was experiencing unexpected side effects. During a routine atmospheric test, she suddenly collapsed, gasping for air. The medical team quickly discovered that her newly altered physiology had become hypersensitive to certain elements common in Earth-like atmospheres. Dr. Kren, working tirelessly to understand these complications, developed a specialized suit for Varys to wear when exposed to problematic environments. As he helped her into the sleek, form-fitting garment, he explained, "This should filter out the elements that are causing your adverse reactions. We'll need to conduct further studies to fully understand these sensitivities." As the day of departure arrived, Matthew and Varys stood on the observation deck of the shuttle that would take them to the Denobulan homeworld. The blue-green orb of the planet loomed before them, a world of new possibilities and unknown challenges. Matthew felt a surge of conflicting emotions as he gazed at their destination. Excitement, fear, hope, and uncertainty all warred within him. He turned to Varys, seeing the same tumult reflected in her eyes. "Ready for this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Varys nodded, her antenna quivering slightly. "As ready as we can be. Whatever happens, we face it together." As the shuttle began its descent towards the Denobulan capital, neither of them could have predicted the trials that lay ahead. The Interspecies Genetic Research Center would become more than just a scientific endeavor. It would be the crucible in which the future of human-Denobulan relations would be forged, for better or worse. For worse. As the shuttle touched down on Denobulan soil, neither Matthew nor Varys could have anticipated the challenges that lay ahead. The first few weeks at the Interspecies Genetic Research Center, IGRC, were a whirlwind of activity. Scientists from both species worked tirelessly, studying Matthew and Varys' unique physiology. The facility buzzed with excitement as new discoveries were made daily. However, as Matthew reviewed the latest batch of test results, something caught his eye, a discrepancy in the DNA sequencing data. At first, he dismissed it as a simple error, but as he dug deeper, a disturbing pattern emerged. "Varys," he called out, his voice tight with concern, "I need you to look at this." She joined him at the holographic display, her enhanced cognitive abilities allowing her to process the complex data in seconds. Her antenna twitched as she frowned. "This can't be right. These markers, they've been altered." Matthew nodded grimly. "Someone's been tampering with our samples. But why?" Their discovery set off a chain of events that would shake the foundation of human-Denobulan relations. As they discreetly began to investigate, they uncovered a trail of evidence pointing to a conspiracy far larger than they could have imagined. Late one night, as they pored over encrypted files in a secluded lab, Varys suddenly gasped. "Matthew, look at this. These communications, they're from a group calling themselves the Purists." Matthew leaned in, his enhanced vision allowing him to read the tiny text with ease. "Both humans and Denobulans, working together to sabotage our research. But why?" Their clandestine investigation took them beyond the confines of the IGRC. Matthew's increased strength and stamina proved invaluable as they infiltrated a hidden Purist base on a remote Denobulan moon. Slipping past advanced security systems, they found themselves in a control room filled with holographic displays. "They're planning attacks," Matthew whispered, his eyes widening as he scanned the information. "Multiple targets, including the IGRC." Varys, meanwhile, focused on decrypting a series of intercepted communications. Her fingers flew over the interface, her mind processing the data at an unprecedented speed. Suddenly, she froze. "Matthew, you need to see this." The decrypted message revealed a list of names, high-ranking officials from both human and denobulan governments, all implicated in the purist movement. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. As they delved deeper into the purist plot, Matthew and Varys found themselves pushed to their limits. During a covert operation to gather evidence from a purist safehouse, Matthew's mood swings struck at the worst possible moment. One second he was focused, the next overwhelmed by a wave of inexplicable anger. "Matthew, focus!" Varys hissed, her hand on his arm. Her touch seemed to anchor him, pulling him back from the brink. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. "Thanks. I don't know what came over me." Their next mission took them to a series of underground caverns on a denobulan colony world. As they navigated the twisting passages, Varys suddenly collapsed, gasping for air. The specialized suit Dr. Kren had designed for her was malfunctioning, unable to filter out the high concentrations of xenon in the cavern atmosphere. Matthew acted quickly, scooping her up in his arms. His enhanced strength allowed him to carry her effortlessly as he raced back to their shuttle, her labored breathing driving him forward. Once safe, they pored over the data they'd managed to salvage. As the pieces fell into place, a chilling picture emerged. At the center of it all was a name they both recognized: Admiral Zoran. "It can't be," Varys whispered, her antenna drooping in disbelief. "General Thax's rival? He's the mastermind behind all this?" Matthew nodded grimly. "And his goal is clear. He wants to provoke a war between our species." Their final push for evidence led them to a neutral space station where a secret purist meeting was taking place. As they made their way through the station's maze-like corridors, Matthew's enhanced senses allowed him to detect approaching guards long before they came into view. In a maintenance shaft, they overheard a conversation that confirmed their worst fears. Admiral Zoran's voice echoed through the metal walls, outlining his vision of a conflict that would purify both species. As they moved to secure recordings of the meeting, alarms suddenly blared throughout the station. They'd been discovered. Matthew and Varys found themselves cornered by a squad of purist guards, a mix of humans and denobulans, all armed with advanced weaponry. Matthew's muscles tensed as he prepared for a fight. "Stay behind me," he told Varys, his body moving with inhuman speed as he engaged the first wave of attackers. Varys, meanwhile, focused on hacking the station's security systems. Her enhanced cognitive abilities allowed her to process multiple data streams simultaneously, staying one step ahead of the station's AI. As Matthew fought his way through the purist forces, he found himself face to face with Admiral Zoran himself. The denobulan admiral's eyes gleamed with an unnatural light, his movements betraying enhancements of his own. "You're too late," Zoran snarled, lunging at Matthew with surprising speed. "The wheels are already in motion. War is inevitable." Their battle raged through the station's control room, a showcase of the terrifying potential of their altered physiologies. Matthew's strength and reflexes were pushed to their limits as he traded blows with the enhanced admiral. Meanwhile, Varys worked frantically to transmit the evidence they'd gathered. The station's AI fought back, throwing up firewalls and countermeasures faster than any normal mind could process. But Varys was far from normal now, her hybrid brain interfacing with the computer systems in ways that defied conventional understanding. Just as Matthew gained the upper hand in his fight with Zoran, pinning the admiral to the ground, a new alarm sounded. Varys's eyes widened in horror as she read the emergency alerts flooding the system. "Matthew," she called out, "the hybrid DNA samples they brought for their experiments, they're destabilizing. If they rupture, the mutagenic cloud could spread to nearby planets." They locked eyes, a silent understanding passing between them. Without a word, they sprang into action. Matthew used his strength to seal off contaminated sections of the station, while Varys interfaced directly with the station's computers, initiating emergency protocols. As evacuation ships arrived to rescue the station's occupants, Matthew and Varys found themselves trapped in the most heavily contaminated area. Alarms blared around them as the station began to break apart. "There's no time," Matthew said, his voice strained. "We have to contain it ourselves." Varys nodded, her face set with persistence. Together. They stepped into the swirling mass of mutagenic material, their bodies immediately racked with pain. As consciousness began to fade, Matthew felt Varys's mind brush against his own, their thoughts intertwining in a way that transcended physical touch. The last thing Matthew saw before darkness took him was a brilliant flash of light, and then nothing. When awareness returned, Matthew found himself encased in a quarantine pod, the concerned faces of human and denobulan medical staff peering down at him. In the pod next to his, Varys was just beginning to stir. As the medical scanners hummed, cataloging the unprecedented changes in their genetic structure, Matthew realized that their journey was just the beginning. The defeat of Admiral Zoran and the Purist was just the beginning. What lay ahead, for them, for their species, and for the future of interspecies relations, remained to be seen. Matthew's eyes fluttered open, adjusting to the harsh light of the quarantine pod. His body felt different, lighter, yet somehow more substantial. As his vision cleared, he saw a team of human and denobulan medical staff peering down at him, their expressions a mix of concern and excitement. In the pod next to his, Varys stirred, her antenna twitching as she regained consciousness. Their eyes met, and Matthew felt a surge of relief wash over him. They had survived. Dr. Kren approached, his face betraying a hint of awe as he studied the readouts on the medical scanners. "Remarkable," he murmured, shaking his head in disbelief. "The mutagenic cloud. It's accelerated and stabilized your hybrid evolution." As the medical team helped them out of the pods, Matthew marveled at the newfound strength in his limbs. Every movement felt effortless, precise. Beside him, Varys flexed her fingers, her eyes widening as she sensed the changes in her own body. "Your exposure to the cloud has eliminated the previous side effects," Dr. Kren explained, his voice brimming with enthusiasm. "And it seems to have granted you unprecedented capabilities." Over the next few days, as they underwent a battery of tests, the full extent of their transformation became clear. Matthew effortlessly lifted weights that would have challenged even the strongest humans or denobulans. Varys solved complex mathematical equations in seconds, her mind processing information at an astonishing rate. But it was their enhanced empathic abilities that truly set them apart. As they stood facing each other during one of the experiments, Matthew felt his consciousness brush against Varys's. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced, a connection that transcended words, allowing them to share thoughts and emotions with startling clarity. "It's beautiful," Varys whispered, her antenna quivering with emotion. As they marveled at their new abilities, Dr. Kren brought them up to speed on recent events. "The Purist conspiracy has been fully exposed," he informed them. "Admiral Zoran and his co-conspirators are in custody. Both our governments are working to dismantle the remaining Purist cells." The news filled Matthew with a sense of relief, but also purpose. He turned to Varys, seeing the same persistence reflected in her eyes. "We need to do more," he said. "Our transformation, it could change everything." In the weeks that followed, Matthew and Varys threw themselves into a series of controlled experiments, eager to test the limits of their new abilities. They demonstrated feats of strength, agility, and intelligence that left even the most skeptical scientists in awe. During one particularly grueling session, Matthew found himself running on a specially designed treadmill, his legs a blur of motion. He had been sprinting at top speed for over an hour, yet felt no fatigue. Beside him, Varys manipulated complex holographic models of subatomic particles, her mind effortlessly unraveling the mysteries of quantum mechanics. As news of their transformation spread, public opinion began to shift. Footage of their extraordinary abilities went viral across both human and denobulan networks. Those who had once viewed the idea of genetic hybridization with suspicion now saw its potential benefits. The Interspecies Genetic Research Center expanded its programs, with Matthew and Varys serving as both advisors and test subjects. They worked tirelessly, pushing the boundaries of what was possible when human and denobulan genetics combined. Their efforts did not go unnoticed. One morning, as they prepared for another day of experiments, they received an unexpected visitor. General Thax himself arrived at the facility, accompanied by a delegation of high-ranking Earth officials. "Matthew, Varys," the general greeted them, his usually stern face softened by a rare smile. "Your achievements have not gone unnoticed. We have a proposition for you." The general explained that both Earth and denobulan authorities had come to a unanimous decision. They wanted to appoint Matthew and Varys as official ambassadors for interspecies relations. "Your unique status makes you ideal candidates," one of the Earth officials added. "You embody the best of both our species. We believe you can bridge gaps and foster understanding in ways no one else can." Matthew and Varys exchanged a glance, their enhanced empathic abilities allowing them to communicate without words. They both felt the weight of the responsibility being offered, but also the excitement of the opportunity. "We accept," they said in unison. Within days, they found themselves embarking on a galactic tour, visiting various worlds to promote understanding and cooperation between different species. Their first stop was a Federation outpost on the fringes of known space, where tensions between different alien races had been simmering for years. As they stepped off their sleek diplomatic vessel, Matthew marveled at the diversity of life forms gathered to greet them. Beings of all shapes, sizes, and colors watched with a mix of curiosity and apprehension as the human-denobulan hybrids approached. Varys took the lead, her antenna twitching as she sensed the complex web of emotions surrounding them. She began to speak, her words carefully chosen to resonate with the assembled crowd. As she talked about the benefits of cooperation and the strength found in diversity, Matthew noticed a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Using their enhanced empathic abilities, they could feel the initial skepticism giving way to interest and then to hope. By the end of their address, the once fractious groups were engaged in animated discussion, finding common ground where before there had been only mistrust. Their success at the outpost was just the beginning. As they continued their tour, Matthew and Varys found themselves facing increasingly complex diplomatic challenges. Each world they visited presented unique opportunities to showcase the positive potential of human-denobulan collaboration. On a tidally locked planet with extreme temperature variations, they worked with local engineers to design habitats that could withstand the harsh conditions. Their combined knowledge of human and denobulan architecture, enhanced by their hybrid intellect, resulted in structures that could adapt to both scorching heat and freezing cold. During a stop at a space station, serving as a hub for interstellar trade, they mediated a tense dispute between rival merchant guilds. Their ability to understand and articulate the needs of both sides, coupled with their enhanced problem-solving skills, led to a revolutionary new trade agreement that benefited all parties. As they traveled from world to world, Matthew and Varys found their bond deepening. The unique connection forged by their hybrid nature allowed them to work together with unparalleled synergy. They could anticipate each other's thoughts, finish each other's sentences, and provide support in ways that transcended physical touch. Their growing reputation caught the attention of beings far beyond the scope of human and denobulan influence. Whispers of their achievements reached the ears of the Galactic Council, a governing body of advanced alien civilizations that had long viewed Earth and Denobula as promising but underdeveloped worlds. As Matthew and Varys prepared to depart from their latest diplomatic mission, they received an urgent communication. The Galactic Council had extended an invitation for Earth and Denobula to join as probationary members, an unprecedented opportunity that could reshape the future of both their species. The news filled them with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. They knew that this invitation was largely due to their efforts, a testament to the potential of human-denobulan cooperation, but they also understood the enormous responsibility that came with it. As their ship set a course for the Galactic Council's headquarters, Matthew turned to Varys, taking her hand in his. No words were necessary. Their enhanced empathic bond allowed them to share their hopes, fears, and perseverance for the challenges that lay ahead. The journey to the Council's headquarters would take several days, giving them time to prepare for the momentous occasion. As they stood together in the ship's observatory, watching stars streak by, they reflected on how far they had come since that first tentative study of human mating practices. Neither of them could have imagined that their journey would lead them here, on the brink of ushering their species into a new era of galactic cooperation. As the ship hurtled through space, carrying them towards their destiny, Matthew and Varys knew that their greatest adventure was just beginning.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.